Imagine achieving everything you have ever desired, only to find that the very success you chased feels remarkably hollow, replaced instantly by a gnawing anxiety of losing it all. We are culturally conditioned to manifest success through relentless positive thinking, yet this unyielding optimism leaves us utterly defenseless when reality inevitably fractures. What if the most profound strategy for cultivating enduring joy and unshakable resilience requires you to deliberately visualize the absolute worst-case scenarios? You might recognize this subtle psychological trap in your own life. You finally secure the promotion, buy the dream home, or find the ideal partner, and for a fleeting moment, you are deeply satisfied. But almost overnight, the baseline shifts and the extraordinary becomes mundane, while a quiet dread of losing these new comforts begins to shadow your every move. How do we break this cycle of perpetual dissatisfaction and fragility to truly appreciate the present? The Growth Codex provides a systematic framework for dismantling this exact psychological vulnerability, drawing upon a counterintuitive practice forged in the fires of ancient antiquity. Over 2 millennia ago, the practitioners of Stoic philosophy recognized that human misery stems not from external events, but from our flawed expectations regarding those events. To combat this, they developed Premeditatio Malorum, a Latin term translating to the premeditation of evils, which serves as a deliberate mental rehearsal of adversity. Seneca, one of the most prominent voices of this ancient philosophy, was a statesman of immense wealth who intimately understood the precarious nature of fortune. He did not merely write about theoretical resilience. He actively practiced it by periodically wearing coarse clothing, eating the plainest food, and mentally stripping away his vast riches. By simulating poverty and exile in his mind, Seneca inoculated himself against the shock of sudden misfortune, transforming potential devastation into a manageable inconvenience. To understand why this works, we must examine the cognitive bias of hedonic adaptation, which is the psychological tendency for humans to quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative events. Our brains are neurologically wired to adapt to our surroundings, meaning the luxuries of yesterday inevitably become the invisible expectations of today. Negative visualization forcefully interrupts this adaptation process, artificially resetting our psychological baseline by reminding us of what absence feels like. Modern self-help gurus often preach that visualizing failure will somehow attract it into your life, advocating for a toxic positivity that demands we ignore the darker shades of existence. Yet, ignoring gravity does not prevent you from falling. It merely ensures you are unprepared when you hit the ground. The premeditation of evils does not manifest disaster. Rather, it acts as a psychological immune system, generating antibodies of resilience before the actual pathogen of tragedy strikes. When you deliberately imagine losing your job, your home, or your health, you engage the brain's prefrontal cortex to process the emotional weight of that loss in a controlled environment. Neuroscience reveals that the brain often struggles to distinguish between vividly imagined scenarios and lived reality, allowing you to experience the emotional processing of grief and recovery without the actual physical devastation. You are essentially running a fire drill for your nervous system. This brings us to the mental model of the psychological safety net, a conceptual framework that allows us to understand how our minds construct security. By staring directly into the abyss of our deepest fears, we systematically dismantle the unknown variables that give those fears their paralyzing power. When you map out the exact contours of the worst-case scenario, you almost always discover that you possess the internal resources required to survive it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled over a turbulent empire ravaged by war and plague, utilized this exact mental framework every single morning. He famously wrote in his private journal, reminding himself that he would encounter meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, and dishonest people throughout the day. By mentally rehearsing these inevitable frictions before he even left his tent, the emperor ensured that his tranquility could not be shattered by the predictable flaws of human nature. You can implement this imperial strategy immediately by dedicating 5 minutes of your morning routine to intentional negative visualization. Sit quietly and select one pillar of your current life that you take for granted, whether it is your physical mobility, your primary source of income, or the presence of a specific loved one. Close your eyes and vividly imagine that this pillar has been suddenly and permanently removed from your existence, feeling the full weight of that absence. As you sit with this manufactured discomfort, a profound shift in your emotional intelligence begins to occur. The gnawing anxiety of potential loss is gradually replaced by a fierce, crystalline appreciation for the present reality where this loss has not yet happened. You open your eyes to find that the mundane elements of your life have been suddenly illuminated with vibrant value, simply because you remembered that they are temporary. This ancient wisdom applied today fundamentally reshapes our relationship with attachment and desire. We stop clinging to our possessions and relationships with a suffocating grip of fear, recognizing that all things are essentially on loan to us from the universe. The realization of impermanence does not diminish our love for what we have. It magnifies it, urging us to savor every interaction precisely because its expiration date is unknown. Consider how this transforms the landscape of a long-term romantic relationship, where the initial spark often fades into a comfortable yet dangerous complacency. When you look at your partner across the dinner table and briefly imagine a future where that chair sits perpetually empty, the petty argument you had earlier about household chores instantly evaporates. The deliberate contemplation of their absence acts as an immediate antidote to the slow poison of taking them for granted. Epictetus, a philosopher who spent his early life as a slave, offered a stark, uncompromising perspective on this concept of temporary ownership. He advised his students that when they kiss their child or their spouse, they should silently remind themselves that they are kissing a mortal being who could be taken away at any moment. While this sounds incredibly morbid to the modern ear, its purpose was to strip away the illusion of permanence, ensuring that love is expressed fully today, rather than deferred to an uncertain tomorrow. To master this practice without becoming overwhelmed by existential dread, you must employ a heuristic or a mental shortcut of progressive overload. Do not begin your journey into negative visualization by contemplating the death of your closest family members. That is akin to lifting the heaviest weight in the gym on your first day. Start small by visualizing minor inconveniences like a flat tire on your commute or a sudden downpour ruining your weekend plans, and gradually expand your capacity to sit with discomfort. In the realm of business and career development, this practice evolves into a potent decision-making framework often referred to as a pre-mortem analysis. Before launching a new project or making a significant career pivot, gather your team or sit with yourself and assume that the endeavor has failed spectacularly 1 year from now. Work backward from that imagined catastrophe to identify the exact missteps, blind spots, and vulnerabilities that caused the failure, allowing you to build contingencies before the risks materialize. The profound consequence of this rigorous mental auditing is the death of paralyzing perfectionism. When you have already accepted the absolute worst outcome in your mind and formulated a plan to survive it, the ambient terror of failure loses its grip on your throat. You become capable of taking massive, calculated risks, not because you believe you are immune to failure, but because you have already visited the landscape of ruin and realized you can navigate it. Think back to the moments in your life when you felt the most intense, overwhelming gratitude. These moments rarely occur when everything is going perfectly according to plan. They usually strike in the immediate aftermath of a near miss, a recovered illness, or a crisis averted. Negative visualization allows you to hack your own psychology, synthetically generating that intense post-crisis gratitude without requiring you to actually endure the trauma of the crisis itself. The echoes of that ancient wisdom still resonate deeply within this synthetic gratitude. The Stoics understood that fortune is a fickle companion, capable of bestowing incredible gifts one day and ruthlessly confiscating them the next. By practicing Premeditatio Malorum, you align your expectations with the volatile nature of reality, ensuring that when fortune does turn its back on you, you are not caught off guard, raging at the heavens for a perceived injustice. To solidify this cognitive shift, pair your morning visualization with an evening review, closing the loop on your daily psychological hygiene. As you lie in bed, briefly reflect on the minor adversities you actually encountered during the day and compare them to the catastrophic losses you visualized that morning. The contrast will immediately highlight the triviality of your daily frustrations, framing your entire existence in a context of profound, unearned abundance. This dual practice naturally gives rise to the concept of amor fati, a Latin phrase translating to a love of one's fate. It is not merely a passive acceptance of the things you cannot change, but an enthusiastic embrace of every single event that occurs, whether classified as good or bad by society. When you have premeditated the worst, every moment that does not result in total destruction becomes a miraculous victory to be cherished. Exploring this terrain reveals a profound paradox at the heart of human fulfillment. To truly hold on to the joy of our lives, we must practice the art of letting it all go in our minds. By consciously rehearsing the loss of our wealth, our status, and our loved ones, we forge an unbreakable resilience that allows us to engage with the world more courageously and love more fiercely than ever before. Furthermore, this practice rewires the amygdala, the brain's fear center, reducing its hyperreactivity to the daily uncertainties of modern life. When you consistently expose your nervous system to controlled, imagined stressors, the ambient anxiety regarding the future begins to quiet down. The brain learns that it does not need to constantly scan the horizon for threats, because it has already thoroughly prepared for the worst storms the horizon could possibly offer. The distinction between naive optimism and robust Stoic realism remains a guiding star for those committed to systematic self-mastery. You are no longer a fragile vessel hoping the ocean remains perfectly calm. You are a reinforced dreadnought, fully aware that the storms are coming and confident in your structural integrity to sail directly through them. This is the ultimate freedom, the liberation from the tyranny of external circumstances over your internal state. The Growth Codex demands action over mere intellectual consumption. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone or rush into the demands of the day, sit in silence and mentally strip away the one thing you believe you cannot live without. Face the void. Feel the absence, and then open your eyes to reclaim the beautiful, fragile reality that is still yours to experience, armed with a resilience that no twist of fate can ever shatter.